introduce the next session, and it's on hospitality in action, providing a roadmap for other sectors in the travel industry. So let me introduce the co-founder of Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency as our moderator, Jeremy Smith. Jeremy, please come up. And the rest of the panel members, I'll let you have the honor of introducing them. Why don't you sit right there, and there's a microphone waiting right for you on the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us after lunch. I'm joined here today by a fantastic panel. I have Ufi Ibrahim from the Energy and Environment Alliance, Franck Bermond from AccorInvest, James Fisher from BREEAM. We'll talk more about what BREEAM is in a minute, and Inge Huijbrechts, sort of just about right, from Radisson. We're here to talk about hospitality, about our sector, but to talk about it and how the processes we've been working through as a sector over the last few years, and very much increasing urgency, have something hopefully to share with all of you, regardless of what sector you're in. And in particular, we're going to be looking obviously at sustainability and looking very much at how processes of coming together to work around assessment, certification, monitoring, how we bring this all together for many different parts of our sector, who often are at different stages of the journey, and why has been so complicated, because it's a conversation we have been having for a very long time. So I'm going to start by looking at really why this is an issue, where the challenges are, and why we continue to have conversations around certification and sustainability. And I'm going to turn first of all to James, who brings an interesting perspective. James, from BREEAM, the longest running assessment and certification program for the built environment in the world, if I'm correct, working beyond and in the tourism sector in anything in the built environment, looking at the world of sustainability certification and the challenges. What is your big picture on it all?
So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity. James Fisher here from BRE Group, which is the author and keeper of the BREEAM standard, which is a sustainability certification scheme. We've been running that standard for 30 years, and we've got 600,000 certificates issued globally. Just to come to the question, we operate across all sectors of real estate, and we've been working very closely with partners here on the stage, particularly Ufi from the EEA, to take some of the lessons of BREEAM for some of the other sectors and refine the standard for hospitality. When we come to the question of the challenge around is sustainability certification delivering, you know, we've had lots of conversations in the run-up to this, but for me it feels like we need to do more to translate the measurement into outcomes, what it actually means for people, you know, who are working in facilities, hotels, or the visitors, of course, that are coming. And of course, I think one of the big challenges is that there is probably 573 different sustainability certificates. Sorry, it's 574. Someone just created another one while I was speaking. So that was a joke. You can laugh if you want. We haven't had a new Prime Minister in the time that I've been speaking, though. No. So, so there's lots of standards out there. People don't know, you know, what they all mean. And I think the key here is to make sure that you're using a robust standard that matches up to the very highest levels of scrutiny. So a third-party certification scheme, which is what BREEAM is. Thank you.
Franck, from AccorInvest, which isn't Accor, but does have Accor very much at the beginning of the name. Can you explain the significance for you as an investor of certification and why it isn't delivering what you need, assuming that is the case right now?
So, Jeremy, I'm not going to answer your question.
Oh, well, that won't be the first time.
I do this all the time. I'm not... AccorInvest is and an investor owner and a hotel operator. So I'll address this question on the investor side and the hotel operator side. What makes it difficult for us is that we're both. So we see difficulties on the owner side and the hotel operator side. And as James was saying, 573 for whatever number of certifications. The question is, why do you need a certification? You need a certification to demonstrate that you're doing something in sustainability for part of a population understanding this certification. So it's all down to the business model of hospitality, where you need to talk to investors, you need to talk to clients, you need to talk to different stakeholders, and these different guys see different certifications. So our difficulty in AccorInvest is that we will need to go to multiple certifications, one certifying our ESG strategy, one demonstrating that we are in a carbon footpath, one demonstrating that our assets, BREEAM in use for instance, are getting greener, and one that we're working on with our manager to get clients in the hotel. So that makes at least 4, maybe 5. At least 80–85% of the questions raised in all these certifications are basically the same. But at the end of the day, we will have people answering 4 times similar questions to just talk to different populations. So our main difficulty would be, how can we get something more consistent, unified, so that at the end of the day, we're all here for the same purpose, to change things. It's the same goal, but why do we need so many certifications, label, whatever?
And to extend that complexity, and Inge, turn to you here, speaking from Radisson. Looking at, it's one thing for someone like Franck, who works daily in this industry and is going to take the time to pay attention and to read beyond what the label that he sees says and understand what the differences and the complexities are. But if I'm the consumer, the traveler coming on holiday, where, are the certifications speaking to the traveler right now? Are they using those to make a booking decision or not?
Well, hello everyone. I'm with Radisson Hotel Group. So just to paint a picture, we are 1,100 hotels in about 100 countries. And those hotels, they rank from small boutique properties with 50 rooms to hotels with more than 1,000 rooms. We are an operator, so it means we do not own the assets, the buildings that our hotels are in. And that brings me, actually, I fully agree that we have too many certifications. And the other point is that we talk to different stakeholders. So on one hand, like Radisson, we have committed to be net zero by 2050. We have approved science-based targets. And to do that, to get to net zero, the key thing is to green the buildings. And that is a standard or a set of standards like BREEAM and others that actually relate to asset owners. But that's very technical. So we just learned from the lady from Google that actually when people travel, they want easy information, they want solid and reliable information, and I don't think it's going to be about how the building management system works or whether the building is has triple insulated glazing, and etc., and is going to net zero. So we have created in the industry together, by a collective effort, we have created a pathway to net positive hospitality. And it starts with hotel sustainability basics. And basics is 12 criteria, very simple, very relevant to the traveler, but very real. So also going into energy management, water management, waste, etc., that produces a stamp that is verified. So hopefully we can come to see that very often and in many places to make it easy for the traveler to have that seamless choice when they want to choose a sustainable hotel.
Thank you. We've moved swiftly on to looking at the solutions, which is great because it's complicated and we need to look at the solutions. And they are myriad. And James gave us a sort of a sample of quite how many there are there, and potentially even more since we last were speaking. Ufi, you also have been working very closely on developing a solution to address the challenges from a different perspective to Inge's, and we're going to go into more depth on all of these in a moment. But I'd love to know a little bit more about what is the work that EEA have been doing with BREEAM to understand how we can address the challenges that we're looking at from the different perspectives here.
Okay, well, just on the consumer part, it was a very interesting consumer in 1986 who stood in a hotel bathroom and saw the sign asking guests to reuse their towels in order to save the planet. that created the word greenwashing. So that term was created in a hotel bathroom. And J. Westerveld basically demonstrated that the hotel was unable to verify and validate their claim that by reusing the towels, the guest was contributing to environmental performance. So that definition that J. Westerveld created in a hotel bathroom today informs the precedent which is set by regulators and is used in court cases against companies like Deutsche Bank, Volkswagen, etc. So we have our industry to thank for that definition. And it's an important definition to have because it brings us to this part of what is it that we need to convey to our various audiences? What do we need to communicate? It's important to communicate the what we are doing to become environmentally, socially, and governance friendly. But it's also important about how we communicate that. How do we do it? The information must be verified. It must be validated. So I like the previous presentation which talked about trust, because trust is based on credibility, reputability. So it's not just enough to say, this is what we're doing. It's important that that is validated and verified by qualified assessors who can say they are actually doing what they say. One of the risks in our industry today is that there's a lot of self-congratulatory reporting on how wonderful we are and the wonderful things that we're doing in terms of case studies, for example, which need that underpinning. And that's why we are working with BREEAM and with the industry, companies like AccorInvest, with people like Franck, to create that validation, that verification that will give our customers, our investors, and regulators the confidence that we're actually doing what we say we are doing, and that we're doing things that are meaningful. We're not just trying to do better, we're actually working towards some science-based, rigorous, robust targets.
I mean, you begun in there talking about the consumer part and ended up talking about the investor part, and I think that in itself is it's actually quite helpful because it does show that we look to try to address these incredibly complex challenges, and we find ourselves talking to such a wide range of audiences, from those who will understand the acronyms here and don't need further explanation, to those who might recognize a logo, to those who don't even think about it, and the vast majority of people, when typing a search in on whatever OTA or Google it might be that they're looking for their booking, aren't putting in terms around sustainability when looking, they're putting in terms around experience or location. I'm going to guess that was right from Google's perspective. But and then you say, and I understand why you say it, and I don't disagree with you, that we need to be able to provide a level of trust, and you say that comes through rigorous auditing, but we also need to do it at scale, and we need to be able to do it at a certain speed, and we have a situation where the number of certified hotels in the world, in the tens of thousands, perhaps, low tens of thousands, I'm going to guess, out of, 185,000 hotels worldwide. And is that because 170,000 hotels do not deserve any form of certification, or because we haven't spread the message wide enough because the model needs some shift? I'm looking at you, but I should be looking at everyone. You're sitting next to me. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. James, you sort of looked like very much like you
I offered my mic there, didn't I? No, I mean, I think it's a fair point. So, every day when the team are at BRE, building these standards and trying to refine them for the sector, we absolutely want mass take up, like without a doubt. That's we want people to spend their money on improving their assets' performance rather than the certification itself. Having said that, I think it's fair, whilst BREEAM, I'm not saying the sustainability movement's only been around for 30 years, but BREEAM has been around for quite, a part of that. But it's only now that the world is really turning to this subject. And to Ufi's point, I think, it is drawn by the flow of the capital. And I think in the work that we've been doing, we've been very determined to try and we can always do more, but now to turn that message of what that standard says and what that building is achieving into something that translates to the person who sleeps in the bedroom. You know, we can do that in a very straightforward way. And what we have done, taking your point, is, you know, the agreement that we have with the EEA is that hotels can register and access the tooling, you know, with a deferred invoice for a period of a year. So they actually end up, I'm not saying that there's no final transaction involved, just to be clear, but they get a year of steps and improvement measures that can be taken to help them move along that journey. So, you know, it's not, we haven't completely solved it, but we're certainly making some good steps and some strides in the right direction.
And I mean, so as I understand it, that's not, you know, you said it's deferred. So is it like when I sign up for something and put my credit card details in, knowing it's going to come out in 3 years' time, or is it free and then I make a decision once I've used?
Okay, it's a very practical question. We have an agreement signed with the client, but the way it works is that the money changes hands if the customer went through to certify the asset, which means they can access all the tools and still make all those improvements without taking that step.
So I can benefit for free from knowledge, from training, from guidance, which is a significant,
and also benchmarks, from the other data points in the system.
Okay, and that would apply regarding, you know, this is something that is useful to the SME as much as to Accor or to Radisson.
So the way that we're working with the EA to refine the tools is to make sure we've got classifications of hotel assets at different levels, a la STR, for example, so that, you know, whether it be one end of the spectrum or the other, the data points hold.
Inge.
Yeah, if I may add, because I think it's a very interesting point, and we are all travel and tourism experts here in this audience. Our industry, if you look at the type of hotels, the industry is so diverse. I mean, we are here with the big brands, and the big brands only represent a fraction of the reality of the hotel stock globally. And so even me, in my job daily, I get asked, how do we get started on sustainability? I was just in India visiting our portfolio, and again, we have smaller hotels on the foothills of the Himalayas. They are very socially engaged but on sustainability. They want to know how they get started. And that's why we created the basics, to get everyone on the bandwagon and on the train of sustainability so they can get better. And so I think on the building certifications, to your point, James, and the efforts that Ufi and the entity are trying to do is to democratize it, because we have hotels, we have plenty of hotels that are on BREEAM, LEED, and even on EDGE, which is a green building certificate for emerging markets. But we need maybe even something simpler. We need to be able to say to a property owner who is in India, who has that small boutique hotel, where do you start by doing the 10, 12 things for your building that is going to pay back, but that you can do to make that building greener and to then get started on the pathway to the next levels. So I guess what I'm saying is we need to really reach out and make things available to all types of hotels, all types of owners, and also make it easy for them to get started.
And I mean, so I'll talk a little bit more about what you're saying, the hospitality basics. This isn't a certification scheme. This is a process of bringing people in to the process of developing more sustainably.
Yes, so the basics is really targeted towards the clients, the guests, and it is 12 points that are verified. So it means there's no audit happening on site, but there is proof delivered and centrally stored. So every year, progress needs to be made, and that verification is done by submitting proof on an online platform, which is then big data in a way that can be analyzed on where are we making progress, but maybe also where do we have issues in certain locations. If we are asking for waste recycling and we find that in a certain location there simply isn't anything available, then we, together with the industry and parties such as the UNWTO or the WTTC, we can go speak to the destinations to try and make these things happen. So we try to move on certain points with this verified basics.
And where do, I mean, this is basics, as you said, is 10 steps, but it gets us started. What would happen once I have done the 10 steps?
Well, the point is, in the steps themselves, there is already an improvement mechanism integrated into it. So you need to get better on your 12 criteria every year. After 3 years, you're actually expected to move to a next level. And a next level can be many things. It could be, for example, a GSTC, so a quality eco-label. It could be a company program. It could be any next step that is on that pathway to net positive hospitality.
And just so that we don't even, so we move away from any sense of sort of the abstract, just give me 2 or 3 examples of steps that are included in the basics, so people can really sort of, envision what we're talking about.
It's actually amazing that we managed to find 12 points that the industry agreed on for the industry. I never thought we would make it, but we made it, and we defined 12 points. And so these points are on the areas of efficiency, planet, and people. So in efficiency, you have, for example, you measure your energy and you have a plan to reduce it. You measure your carbon and you have a plan to reduce it. But we're not saying this level of carbon is what you need to achieve yet, because it's a basic level. On the guest experience, you have things like, do you offer vegetarian options? Because vegetarian meals are very important in reducing the overall carbon footprint of our diets. On the social side, it is about reducing inequality and bringing more equality in your hotel team or in your supply chain. So those are just some of the examples of the 12 steps.
And these are operational. James, Ufi, I mean, yours is clearly not a 10-step basics. It looks to be as full and as rigorous and to be delivering what Franck needs to invest. Is there a pathway, that gets people started, or at the built environment level?
Well, I mean, I think it wasn't me. I think it was Bloomberg who said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And, measurement is very important. If you don't know where you are today, then it's very difficult to, and where you need to get to. If you don't have those science-based targets in place, it's very difficult to know where you need to get to by when, and therefore to decide what steps you need to take. So our starting point is very much saying, where are you today? Find out where you are today, which is why the enablement that BREEAM have offered to the industry to actually go in, access this platform, generate a self-assessment, know your own gap analysis, get your own net zero carbon report, all of these things yourself, enabling you to understand what you need to do internally, get your teams together, pull that data together, I think is absolutely critical. Find out where you are first, find out where that sits in terms of what the regulatory requirements are. So we are taking, yes, absolutely a view from the investor standpoint, because investors are under a lot of pressure from regulation. So, we have the Energy Directive, we have all sorts of regulation which are telling us, yes, net zero by 2050 sounds like a long, long way away, but there are targets before that what we have to achieve. So where are you today and how far from that target, and how are you going to get to that target? So these are the sorts of fundamental measurements and targets that we feel are very, very important, which is why we're working with BREEAM to be able to bring that to the industry in a way that is customized specifically for the sector. And in terms of being able to allow businesses to decide on how much their property is worth, how am I going to retain the value of my property? Because if I fall off my trajectory to net zero carbon by 2050, my property is going to lose its value. So really it's E, S, G, and C. The commercial aspect is critical because we need the monies to invest in making this happen. I heard a statistic recently which said that we need an additional $8 trillion globally to transition the world to renewable energy, on top of everything that has currently been invested, despite all the exponential growth in the supply of renewable energy worldwide. In this side of the world, in the Western Hemisphere, governments expect investors to find that cash and that capital. So it is very important for investors to be able to have the metrics in place and the valuations in place to make those decisions as to how and best to, in a meaningful way, to make those investments. They could be a large investor or a small one. It makes no difference at all.
So Franck, as a large investor, I'm going to refer to your company if that's okay when I say that. would you, does this resonate? Does this feel to you that this is the path that supports you in your in your necessary progress?
Yes and no. As an investor, there are things we don't like too much to do, is spend money. So before spending money, we want to do the things which are efficient, not spending money. So since we are this investor, owner, and operator, if we talk just about energy efficiency, we need to think no capex, low capex, and intensive capex. And the first one, the no capex thing, is it's not, I'm convinced, I'm sure, and we can demonstrate it. It's 10-15%, maybe more, gain in energy efficiency. Just by changing the behavior of staff, and this is something we don't talk too much about, is the staff of the hotels. We talk about the clients, we talk about the owners, the investors. We employ 23,000 staff in the hotels. And these guys, they have a big role to play. Basically, stop blowing hot and cold to do warm, blow warm. That's more efficient. That's not necessarily in your certification. This is something which is nowhere. Yeah, it's just, and this is something that we big guys, when we're going to put this in place, everybody can benefit from. Just what does it take? What does it mean? This low capex part, no capex part. Then there is the low capex, changing. No, here you don't have LEDs everywhere, for instance. So relamping, automation systems, better BMS, being able to better control the temperature of the bedrooms. This has an impact. And then the building envelope. But this is maybe without having to build up a certification or going to a certification. Certification is only the demonstration. As we said, you need to know where you are. So maybe the step 0 of all this is building up your data system. What data you want to collect. Believe it or not, in AccorInvest, we don't know the square meters of all our assets. It's a starting point. Future metrics will be divided by square meters. And why don't we have this? Because the hotel industry has always thought bedroom is the metrics. But the world thinks square meters. And we don't have this. So step 0 is building up a data system. What do you want to measure? What do you want to know? What you need? Every single owner should know this. Then where am I? Where are the good guys? Good guys are there. Okay, that's my target. That could be my target. I'm there. It's far. It's not far. And this no capex, low capex, intensive capex, that's the reasonable approach for energy and carbon. And I would say another thing is let's not overcomplicate things, because it's sustainability. Sometimes it's really presented. It's a lot of acronyms. It's a lot of things. I mean, when you dig down into it, it's very complicated, but it can be explained basically in a simple way for everybody to understand. So we need to have some stepping back approach, saying, can be simple. What does it mean thinking carbon? What does it mean thinking circular? Maybe like we were discussing this, like our grandparents were thinking. They were recycling, reusing stuff. We no longer do this. We developed with Accor a bedroom for IBIS, circular bedroom, thinking at the future renovation of the bedroom. So we know that in 7-10 years, we will not throw anything of this bedroom. Everything can be reused. So think carbon, think circular, and think social. Staff are really at the heart of everything. They have a lot of good ideas. There are a lot of very interesting initiatives in the hotels. They are really at the heart of. They are the guys hosting us today. They are the guys making this possible. So we need to put them back at the center of the action, and not pushing the investor pay money to do it. It's these 3 things.
Okay, one particular group of the staff that we did talk about before that I think, in fact, I think it might have been you, Frank, but I'd love to hear from everyone here on it, is the leadership. And we've talked about, we haven't talked today, but we talked before about how important it is to bring leadership along, that the leading part of the company, of the organization, have to really want to do this. You're all leaders, and you all engage leaders in order to make the change. I'd love to know from everyone here, what makes the difference? What is it that gets leadership to change or to deliver? And I'm not expecting the same answer from each of you. Whoever would like to go first? Inge.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I think, we were talking also about the targets to get to net zero, science-based targets. What are your intermediate targets on the road to 2050 being zero carbon? I can say, frankly, that it took about a year to familiarize our top leadership with that concept. The first time you come to an executive committee with this notion of we need to be net zero by 2050, first, it's way too long away. And the second question is, how are we going to get there? And frankly, I don't have all the answers. I have maybe the answers and a plan for the intermediate steps, but not to 2050, so we don't know. And then the third complicated thing is that you need to start measuring and involving for your franchise hotels, for your supply chain. That becomes part of your KPI. That is also something that these top executives in an operating company are not used to in terms of carbon and energy and water. So it took about a year. But I must say, once we familiarize them with the steps that are maybe 5 or 10 years out, and that we can actually get started on that route to net zero, and that there is a mechanism to get these intermediate targets signed off, even though we don't know everything. I think that was a defining moment to say, okay, we're going to go for it. We're going to submit, we'll see what we'll get, and now we have, of course, our science-based targets approved, and we know what the route is to eventually get there with our buildings, with building certifications, and with renewable energy. But it took time. It took time, and it took the confidence that we can take the first steps, even if we don't know the final ones.
Everyone, I'll go down the line. James.
Sorry, James.
That's good, just in case we've got the same one. I'll go first. I mean, for me, this is the hard part when you're having those conversations with the leadership is quite, as you say, making a point that this is a journey, not a destination, and you don't necessarily know everything that you need to know now for 2050. But there's going to be technology step changes that will come along the way. We talked earlier about CFLs versus LEDs, for example, in lighting. So, let people know that we don't have all the pieces. Be honest about that. I think overcoming the battle of the training for internal staff and make the system, the environmental system, part of the way that the company operates is crucial. And quite honestly as well, tell the CEO of the business that the assets may have less value in a few years' time if they don't do something, and also tell them that certification can unlock investor revenue flows that tends to grab their attention, and that's the real situation now.
And that's my case. I have a great boss. Well, he's not here, but I have a great boss, and it's more a threatening, frightening thing. What will happen if I don't do anything? Exactly what James is saying. If I don't do anything, my portfolio will lose value. So I have no other choice than to doing things. What do I do? Well, this is when I step in and don't have all the answers, but I don't tell him that I don't have the answers. I tell him that in 2050 he will not be there to see it, but I'll make sure that it happens, that we'll be on track by 2030. But you don't do anything, you lose value. How are you going to explain this to your shareholders, that you haven't done anything and that your portfolio worth 8 billion is reduced to minus 10%, 20%, whatever? And to say you will no longer, maybe you will no longer have staff because your company is not that attractive, because you haven't done anything on the ESG and mainly the S part. How do you do just to make sure that people are proud of your company? And this is a threat. And the other thing is, the Google part, even if it's in 4th position sustainability today, in the near future it will be on the podium of the 1, 2, 3, and same thing. You will not be able to sell your hotels. So it's this more, if we don't do anything, we're in trouble.
I mean, carrots and sticks, I agree, are very important. So, you know, in terms of carrots, leadership, leadership can dangle carrots, which will inspire the rest of their teams, but they also need to have the information with which they know what those carrots look like. So executive education, I think, is critical. You know, we always talk about educating the staff, make sure that our teams are educated so that they know what to do and how to do it. But sometimes we also need to reflect on the fact that we need to educate our leaders as well. And there is a major opportunity there for us to do that in terms of ESG. So really important to do it so that we don't necessarily always need to turn to carrots, and let alone the sticks, the threats, you know. Hopefully we need to do that. And there are some very good executive education programs out there. We must employ, I think, our leaders to get that education. Any staff member should hold their leader to account and say, have you had this education? Our CEO of our company, has he or she had that education? If not, how can they be a CEO of a major company? Should they be? I don't know. I don't think so, personally.
And if we look at the other, or the piece that the Google's presentation illuminated, which I think we all sort of knew at the bottom of our hearts, which was that the traveller isn't buying for sustainability. They might be influenced and they might make a change there. And yet I've heard too many times someone saying to me, when the traveller demands it, we will deliver it. And yet it feels that we're waiting for something that we may be waiting a very long time. And I'm glad to see people shaking their heads. I wonder, if it's not about delivering for consumer demand, what is there a role for the consumer in supporting our efforts to make the hospitality sector more sustainable? And what is it? Or is it our responsibility and they should just come and relax?
Fine.
No, we want
The circularity.
James,
So,
who's going to go first on the James?
No, I mean, it was just, I can't remember the exact age range, but on the Google slide, which a very interesting presentation, we saw the rise, I think it was the 18 to 24 age group that is starting to demand this, which is great to see. You know, clearly it's going to take a while for that real pull to happen, but people are travelling more now to so-called sustainable destinations. There are places in the world that actually will be suffering potentially in the future from some of these challenges if change doesn't start to happen. And for me, it's about activating the pairs of hands or the people in the corridors, the visitors, the guests as much as the staff in this. So it's back to Inge's point about having something simple and straightforward. Everybody needs to play a part in this, because if we all had to, we had to paint this lecture theatre this afternoon, it's better that 100 of us do 5 minutes painting than one of us does all of it. So it's a job that we all need to take, and I think if we work on some of those messages for those demographic changes that are coming through, everyone needs to will pull in the same direction.
Well, maybe I'll just jump in to say the jury is still out. So we don't know, because it's not just Google, but Booking.com are also, and other search engines are telling us that there is activity in their sustainability filters, but the transactions aren't necessarily taking place in those filters. So the customer is looking and trying to get information, but they're not concluding their transactions there. So the jury is still out. Is that because we're not doing a good enough job communicating with the consumer? That's a question. Or is it that the consumer expects this of us, but isn't willing to pay a premium for it? This is a key question that we haven't answered yet. The data and the analytics aren't there to answer that yet. If it is becoming a hygiene factor, then we have to get that right, very quickly. And it's interesting because the banks, we have a lot of banks in our membership, and the banks who are providing a lot of green finance and institutional capital providing green finance tell me that today they will offer perhaps debt capital on preferential rates, but that's not going to happen for long for ESG programs. Soon, the decision will be, if you don't perform according to their ESG criteria, then they will not provide any debt capital. So the lending community are also looking toward a future where today perhaps there is a carrot, but it's going to become a major stick. So the question is, what's going to happen with the consumer? Is it going to be the same path as the capital, whereby the consumer is going to say, okay, today if you have sustainability, it's nice, but I'm not going to pay you more for it? Or is it going to be a case of, you're not sustainable, I am definitely not going to stay at your hotel? This is what, time, I think, in a very short time, we will begin to see more clearly.
I just want to add, I think there's a very interesting statistic on that. Actually, I was presenting on it yesterday evening as well. In these Expedia and booking surveys, there's always said that more than 70%, I think it's 73% of people say that they want to book responsible stays or responsible travel. But the same percentage of people say that it's not clear enough in the establishments, in the hotels, what the sustainability features are. So I come back and I really reiterate this point over and over again. I think if there's one responsibility that we all have in this hospitality industry, is to make it easy for guests to do good by booking right, by which I mean is to know what these performances are of the hotel, and not by getting a long list of points or a very complex terminology, but something really easy. That's the way people shop. You go to the supermarket, you want to buy sustainable seafood, you go for the MSC logo. That's the way people shop. Seamless, effortless, and fast decisions.
Well, then we're pretty well coming to the end, so we'll stay to time. And to summarize, I think that it needs to be rigorous and accurate, but we also need to make it readable. We need to make it understandable. We need to engage with people where they are. And not everyone is at the same place on the journey. We need to bring people from the beginning, but we need to get them to a point where sustainability really is the default. 2050 is a long way away, and we shouldn't really think about 2050. To be honest, if we're going to think of anything in the future, we should think about 2030. But to be honest, we should be thinking about this year and next year, and maybe rather than visualizing net zero, think about reducing by 7% in the next 12 months, and then doing the same again the year after, and every year after that. But realistically, we need to get on with it. We need to start now. We have some opportunities here. Open source ways of doing things, it's open source, free to read and to learn from tools, step-by-step basics to get us engaged. The stuff that wasn't there is there now. We have an opportunity to get started and a responsibility to do so. So thank you to my panelists for contributing and for sharing with you some really concrete ways that we can move forward. And I hope that was illuminating. Thank you.
Thank you.